us.
Right. We're seeing it all around us, but we are especially seeing it being perpetuated by young people. Young people really believe that this can work. It's like a socialist is really, it is a form of idealism. It's great on paper. I mean, who doesn't want everything to be free? Of course, you can turn around to a 4-year-old and say, how should the world run? And they'd say, how should the world run? And they'd say, everything should be free. Nobody should have to work. It's a great idea on paper, but it doesn't work. So my question is, how are so many young people not aware of not just our modern socialist history, but our socialist present, what's presently happening in Venezuela? That is what sort of boggles my mind.
So the socialism that we're pursuing is, in fact, the socialism of Venezuela. There are close parallels between Venezuelan socialism and American socialism. However, the official doctrine of the left here is to deny that. And it's to say the socialism that they're pursuing, they say, is the socialism of Scandinavia. So they say, look, we know that Venezuela is in a miserable state, but that's not what we're doing. We like the way people live in Norway and Sweden. It's not that bad to live over there, is it? So why don't we import that form of socialism here? Now, the key thing to realize is that with the Scandinavians, they are actually capitalist in wealth creation, socialist in wealth distribution. Now, on the wealth creation side, they never kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. They have low corporate tax rates, about 20%, same as here. They have no minimum wage. They have less regulation. You can actually hire and fire people for any reason. They have no wealth tax, with one exception. They have no inheritance tax. The kind of financial transaction fees that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have proposed for America, that exists in no Scandinavian country. One Scandinavian country, Finland, tried the universal basic income. It didn't work. They got rid of it. So the Scandinavians are actually, they want to create a big pie. Now, when they distribute it, and here is the key point, they impose the burden on the whole society. So they have high tax rates on the middle class, typically 50%. In Sweden, if you make $70,000, you start off by turning half of that, $35,000, to the government. So they don't practice this politics of demonizing the rich. The rich will pay. I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul so I can get Paul's vote. The Scandinavians don't do that. So the truth of it is that the American left says we want to be like Scandinavia, but they don't want to follow the Scandinavian model.
Right. You know, it reminds you when you're saying that, I think it was Margaret Thatcher who said, who was the most immoral Disney hero ever created? And the answer was Robin Hood. Right. Stealing from the rich to give to the poor. You learn, oh, God, this is so great. It's actually the most immoral thing you could possibly do. And I want to get into this because I actually don't think that a lot of these young people, especially when we're seeing the education system go down the drain, where they're learning less, they're not as smart, kids are getting worse grades, are knowing less, they're not competing at the same level that people that graduated high school and college were competing at in decades past, and they're making the school system easier so that people will graduate at higher rates, despite the fact that the people that are graduating are not smart anymore, right? They're not as smart as they were, if you will. And when you talk about that, this education system, you can also realize that they don't actually teach people what socialism is. These students have no idea what it is, right? So let's just get to the basics here. First off, what is socialism?
Socialism it's a little bit of an amoeba term because there was socialism before Marx. The earliest forms of socialism were voluntary communities of people who came together, typically like 100 guys. They pooled all their stuff and they shared everything. In fact, there was kind of a free love component to these communities as well. So these were essentially voluntary communities of people who wanted to live together and not have inequality. Now, Marx came along and basically said, you people are fools. You can do what you want, but this is no model for the world. And Marx introduced the concept of class division. So for Marx, the world is divided into two groups of people, basically the rich and the poor. Marx calls them the proletariat or the working class, and then the capitalist class. And for Marx, there's always a fight between these two groups in which will eventually end with the workers being so oppressed that they will overthrow the capitalist class and take over. And then you would have sort of the perfect society. What's interesting about American socialism is it incorporates this Marxian class division, but it adds other forms of division. So for American socialists now, it's not just rich against poor, it's black against white. It's male against female. It's straight against gay. It is legal against illegal. So I call this identity socialism because it's a marriage of classic socialism and identity politics. So you can almost say that the leftists today are more divisive than Marx because they want to cut up society 8 different ways, and their goal is to cobble together a majority coalition of 51% of oppressed victims. That's what they're after. So they're worse than Robin Hood. See, Robin Hood basically didn't keep it for himself. He had nothing to gain in the Robin Hood story. He was doing it because he was Robin Hood. But see, these politicians have a lot to gain. What they're basically saying is, I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul so I can count on Paul's vote.